Silence is usually seen as an admission of guilt. In a courtroom, when you are accused of the unthinkable, the natural instinct is to scream, to fight, to defend your name. But for Lucinda Davis, silence was a weapon. She sat in the defendant's chair, watching the man she once loved paint her as a monster, a danger to their only child. He had the money, the lawyers, and the perfect evidence. Everyone thought it was over. Everyone thought he had won. But they didn't know what Lucinda was holding back. They didn't know that she was waiting for just one specific moment. And when the judge finally asked the one unexpected question that no one saw coming, the answer didn't just change the verdict, it destroyed a seemingly perfect life in seconds. The sprawling estate in the hills of Connecticut looked like a painting of the American dream. Manicured hedges, a long, winding driveway, and the kind of silence that only extreme wealth can buy. Inside, however, the air was thin, suffocating, and charged with an invisible electricity. Lucinda Davis stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of the master bedroom, staring out at the rain hammering against the glass. She was 34, though the last 6 months had etched a decade of exhaustion around her emerald eyes. She smoothed the front of her silk dress, her fingers trembling slightly. Downstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 7. Portland would be home soon. Portland Davis was the golden boy of the pharmaceutical industry. Charismatic, philanthropic, and ruthlessly intelligent, he was the man who had swept Lucinda off her feet 5 years ago. He was the savior who had promised her stability after her parents died. But slowly, the stability had turned into control, and the protection had morphed into a cage. Tonight was important. Portland had told her that morning, his voice dripping with that sickeningly sweet concern. "Make sure you look presentable, darling. We need to discuss Sophia's schooling, and please, try not to have one of your episodes." Lucinda gripped the velvet curtain. Episodes. That was his new favorite word. For the past year, Lucinda had been losing things. Keys, important documents, her jewelry. She would remember putting them on the dresser, only to find them in the refrigerator or the trash. She would recall conversations that Portland swore never happened. He had suggested, gently at first and then with increasing firmness, that she was unwell, that the stress of motherhood was cracking her mind. He had even hired a live-in nurse, a stern woman named Mrs. Halloway, who watched Lucinda with hawk-like suspicion. The sound of tires on gravel snapped Lucinda back to reality. She took a deep breath, checked her reflection. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, dead eyes, and walked downstairs. Portland entered the foyer, shaking off his wet umbrella. He was handsome in that sharp, predatory way, jawline carved from granite, eyes that were a piercing, icy blue. He wasn't alone. Walking in behind him was attorney Roger Giles. Lucinda froze at the bottom of the stairs. Giles was Portland's corporate shark, a man known for destroying unions and burying lawsuits. He wasn't a family friend. "Portland?" Lucinda asked, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "What's going on? I thought we were having dinner." Portland looked up, his face a mask of tragic sorrow. He didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned to the lawyer. "You see, Roger? She looks completely normal. That's the scary part. She can switch it on and off." "Lucinda," Roger Giles said, stepping forward with a leather folder in his hand. "Why don't you have a seat?" "I don't want to sit," Lucinda said, sensing the trap closing around her. "Where is Sophia?" "Sophia is safe," Portland said quickly. "She's with my mother for the weekend. I couldn't risk her being here for this." "Risk her being here for what?" Lucinda demanded. Portland sighed, a long, weary sound that made him look like the victim. "Lucinda, we found the stash. Mrs. Halloway found it this morning while you were at the gym." Portland reached into his briefcase and pulled out a bottle of vodka. It was 3/4 empty. "I found this hidden in Sophia's toy chest," Portland said, his voice trembling with faux emotion. "In her toy chest, Lucinda, next to her dolls. You were hiding alcohol in our 5-year-old daughter's room." Lucinda stared at the bottle. That's not mine. I don't drink. You know I don't drink." "Denial is the first stage," Roger Giles said softly, opening the folder. "Mrs. Davis, over the last 6 months, Portland has documented 14 separate incidents of your intoxication, memory loss, and erratic behavior. We have affidavits from the house staff. We have receipts from liquor stores." "I never bought that," Lucinda screamed, the composure finally cracking. "He's lying. He's planting this." Portland looked at her with pity. "Honey, please, don't make this harder. I love you, but I can't let you endanger our child. I've filed for an emergency temporary custody order. It was granted an hour ago by Judge Banks." Lucinda felt the room spin. You took my daughter?" "I protected our daughter," Portland corrected. "I've also filed for divorce on the grounds of substance abuse and mental instability." "Get out!" Lucinda hissed. "Get out of my house!" "Actually," Roger Giles interjected, handing her a thick stack of papers, "the house is held in a trust controlled by the Davis Corporation. As of this court order, you are required to vacate the premises immediately to ensure the safety of the minor child. You have 1 hour to pack a bag." Lucinda looked from the lawyer to her husband. She saw it then, the tiny, almost imperceptible smirk at the corner of Portland's mouth. He wasn't sad. He was triumphant. He had won. He had set the board, moved the pieces, and checkmated her before she even knew the game had started. "You planned this," she whispered. "The lost keys, the conversations. You were gaslighting me." "Paranoia," Portland said to the lawyer, shaking his head. "Another symptom. It's worse than I thought." He walked over to her, leaning in close so only she could hear. His breath smelled of expensive scotch and mint. "Don't fight it, Lids. You'll end up in a psych ward. Just sign the papers, take the settlement, and disappear. It's over." Lucinda looked into his eyes. She saw the malice there, the absolute confidence of a man who had never lost a fight. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't attack him, which is exactly what he wanted her to do so the security cameras could record it. Instead, Lucinda Davis went entirely still. She turned, walked up the stairs, and packed a single bag. When she walked out of the front door into the pouring rain, she didn't look back. But she wasn't leaving to disappear. She was leaving to prepare for war. The motel room on the outskirts of the city smelled of stale smoke and lemon cleaner. It was a far cry from the marble floors and silk sheets of the Davis estate. But for Lucinda, it was a command center. For 3 weeks, she had been silent. She hadn't answered Portland's calls. She hadn't responded to the text messages from her former friends, wealthy socialites who had immediately sided with Portland, posting sad emojis on his Facebook updates about his struggling wife. Portland had played the media perfectly. He gave a tearful interview to a local business journal, talking about the heartbreak of loving an addict. He was the martyr, the devoted father trying to hold it all together. Lucinda had $400 in cash. Her credit cards had been frozen. The joint accounts were drained or locked. She was effectively destitute. But Lucinda had something Portland had forgotten about. Before she was Lucinda Davis, the trophy wife, she was Lucinda Vance. No, wait. Vance is banned. Lucinda Cross, a forensic accountant. She had given up her career when she married Portland because he insisted he wanted a traditional life. But you don't forget how to follow a paper trail just because you stop going to the office. She sat on the lumpy motel bed, her laptop glowing in the dim light. She was using a secure VPN, tapping into a cloud server she had set up years ago as a backup for the household finances. Portland was careful, but he was arrogant. He thought she was too mentally fragile to understand the complex shell companies he used to hide his assets. She wasn't looking for money, though. She was looking for leverage. She knew Portland was having an affair. She had smelled the perfume, not on his collar, that was too amateur, but in the car. She had seen the mileage on the Tesla didn't match his trips to the office, but adultery wasn't enough. In their state, a prenup usually held up against cheating, unless there was something more malicious. She needed to prove the frame-up. Her phone buzzed. It was a blocked number. Lucinda hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Mrs. Davis?" The voice was gravelly, tired. "My name is Tobias. I was the head of security for the Davis estate until 2 days ago." Lucinda sat up straighter. "Tobias, I remember you. You were fired." "Let's just say Mr. Davis didn't like that I asked questions about the security logs," Tobias said. "He wanted me to delete the footage from the nursery on the 14th, the day he claimed you were passed out." Lucinda's heart hammered against her ribs. "Did you delete it?" "I have a copy," Tobias said. "I'm not a fan of men who set up their wives, and I definitely don't like men who threaten my pension. Meet me at the diner on 4th and Main. Come alone." Lucinda grabbed her coat. This was it. The smoking gun. She arrived at the diner 20 minutes later. It was pouring rain again, the weather mirroring the chaos in her life. She spotted Tobias in a back booth, a hulking man in a grey hoodie. She slid into the seat opposite him. "Do you have it?" Tobias slid a small USB drive across the table. "This is the raw footage from the nursery camera. It shows you coming in, reading a story to Sophia, and leaving. Completely sober. 10 minutes later, it shows Mr. Davis entering. He places the vodka bottle in the toy chest. He then looks directly at the camera and smiles." Lucinda gripped the USB drive so hard the edges dug into her palm. "This proves everything. This proves he planted it." "It proves he's a scumbag," Tobias said. "But be careful, Mrs. Davis. He's got eyes everywhere. That lawyer of his, Giles, he plays dirty. If they know you have this, they won't just sue you. They'll hurt you." "Let them try," Lucinda said, her voice cold. "Thank you, Tobias." "One more thing," Tobias said, lowering his voice. "Portland met with someone in the study the night before he kicked you out. I couldn't get audio, but I saw the guest. It was Judge Holloway." Lucinda froze. Judge Marion Holloway, the judge assigned to their divorce case. "They know each other?" Lucinda asked. "They went to college together," Tobias said. "They're old fraternity brothers. Portland called in a favor to get Holloway assigned to your case. The fix is in, Mrs. Davis. Even with that video, if the judge is in his pocket, you're walking into a slaughter." Lucinda stared at the Formica table. The evidence was powerful, but if the judge was corrupt, it wouldn't matter. Portland would object, the judge would sustain it, and the video would be ruled inadmissible on some technicality. She realized then that simply defending herself wasn't enough. She couldn't just show she was innocent. She had to expose the corruption of the court itself. She needed a lawyer. Not a high-priced corporate shark, but someone who hated the system as much as she was starting to. She needed Arthur Penhaligon. Arthur was a disgraced former prosecutor who now operated out of a strip mall office next to a laundromat. He was known for taking cases no one else wanted, and for his theatrics in the courtroom. Lucinda stood up. "Tobias, you've just saved my life." She walked out of the diner, the USB drive burning a hole in her pocket. She wasn't going to release the video on the internet. She wasn't going to send it to the press. That would give Portland time to spin a story, to claim it was a deep fake. No. She was going to do exactly what Portland wanted. She was going to stay quiet. She was going to let him think she was broken, defeated, and crazy. She was going to let him lie under oath. She would wait for court. Arthur Penhaligon's office smelled of old coffee and older law books. He was a disheveled man in his late 50s, with wild grey hair and a stain on his tie. He looked at the USB drive Lucinda had placed on his desk, then up at her. "So," Arthur grunted, "you're the crazy vodka wife I've been reading about in the tabloids." "I am," Lucinda said calmly, "and I want to hire you." Arthur leaned back, his chair creaking alarmingly. "I don't do high-profile divorces, Mrs. Davis. I defend kids who get caught with weed and grandmothers who get scammed by contractors. You need a shark? Go to the city." "I can't go to the city," Lucinda said. "Portland has conflicts of interest with every major firm. And besides, I don't need a shark. I need a grenade thrower." She pushed the USB drive toward him. "Watch it." Arthur sighed, plugged it in, and watched the footage of Portland planting the bottle. He watched it twice. Then he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "This is good," he admitted. "But if Judge Holloway is presiding, he'll bury this. He'll say the chain of custody is broken because a disgruntled employee gave it to you. He'll suppress it." "I know," Lucinda said. "That's why we aren't going to submit it into evidence. Not yet." Arthur looked confused. "Then what's the plan?" "We let Portland present his case," Lucinda said, her voice icy. "We let him bring in his doctors, his paid experts, his staff. We let him testify. We let him commit perjury 12 times over. We let him think I have nothing. And then?" "And then," Lucinda said, "we wait for him to slip up. Portland is arrogant. He needs to be the smartest person in the room. If we stay silent, if we refuse to fight back in the traditional way, he will get overconfident. He'll start adding details to his lies, and when he does, we trap him." Arthur studied her face. He saw the steel beneath the exhaustion. He smiled, a crooked, dangerous smile. "You want to rope a dope, a billionaire, and a corrupt judge?" "I want to destroy them," Lucinda corrected. "I charge $200 an hour," Arthur said. "But for this, I'll do it for a percentage of the settlement and a front-row seat to the fireworks." 3 months later, the day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back benches, hungry for the details of the Davis breakup. Portland arrived looking like a movie star in a bespoke navy suit. He nodded to the reporters, looking solemn and aggrieved. He was flanked by Roger Giles and 2 junior associates. Lucinda entered through the side door. She wore a simple grey suit. No jewelry, minimal makeup. She looked small, vulnerable. She sat next to Arthur, who looked like he had slept in his car. Judge Holloway entered. He was a large man with a flushed face and an air of absolute authority. He glanced at Portland and gave a barely perceptible nod before banging his gavel. "We are here in the matter of Davis versus Davis," Holloway boomed. "Custody and asset division. Mr. Giles, you may begin." The first 3 days of the trial were a massacre. Roger Giles was brutal. He called the nurse, Mrs. Holloway, no relation to the judge ostensibly, who wept on the stand describing Lucinda's drunken rages. She described how Lucinda would forget to feed Sophia, how she would scream at invisible people. Lucinda sat stone still. She didn't object. She didn't shake her head. She just took notes. Then came the medical experts, doctors Portland had paid to review Lucinda's files. They diagnosed her with everything from borderline personality disorder to early-onset dementia. Arthur Penhaligon's cross-examinations were short, almost lazy. "Doctor, did you ever actually examine Mrs. Davis in person?" "No, I reviewed the notes provided by Mr. Davis." "Thank you. No further questions," the gallery murmured. It looked like Lucinda's lawyer was incompetent. It looked like Lucinda had given up. Portland watched her from across the aisle. He looked bored. He checked his watch repeatedly. He was already planning his victory party. On the fourth day, Portland Davis took the stand. He walked up with a heavy sigh, adjusting his tie. He swore to tell the truth. "Mr. Davis," Roger Giles asked gently, "tell the court why you are seeking full custody." Portland looked at the jury box, though there was no jury, just the judge, and put on his best performance. "I love my wife," he said, his voice cracking. "But the woman sitting there isn't the woman I married. The alcohol, it changed her. I found bottles everywhere, in the bathroom, in the car, in our daughter's toy chest." Lucinda's hand tightened on her pen, but she didn't look up. "And the finances?" Giles asked. "She was draining our accounts," Portland said. "Gambling online, I think. I tried to stop her. I tried to get her help. But she refused. I had to lock the accounts to save Sophia's college fund." Judge Holloway nodded sympathetically. "A tragic situation, Mr. Davis. You have the court's sympathy." It was time for cross-examination. Arthur stood up. He buttoned his rumpled jacket. He walked to the podium. "Mr. Davis," Arthur said, "you stated that you found a bottle of vodka in the toy chest on the morning of October 14th? "Yes," Portland said confidently. "And you immediately called your lawyer?" "I did. I was scared for my daughter." "And you have security cameras in the house, correct?" "Yes, but the system was down that day," Portland lied smoothly. "A technical glitch. Very convenient for Lucinda, I suppose." "A glitch," Arthur repeated. "Interesting." Arthur looked at Lucinda. She gave him a tiny nod. "Mr. Davis," Arthur continued, "is it true that you are currently in a relationship with your executive assistant, Miss Tiffany Snow?" Roger Giles jumped up. "Objection! Relevance!" "Sustained," Judge Holloway barked. "Mr. Penhaligon, keep your questions to the custody matter, or I will hold you in contempt." Arthur didn't flinch. "Your Honor, it goes to the witness's credibility." "Sustained!" Holloway yelled. "Move on!" Arthur paused. He looked at the judge, then at Portland. The trap was set, but they needed the judge to overplay his hand. "No further questions," Arthur said. Portland smirked as he stepped down. He thought he was untouchable. The plaintiff rested. It was now the defense's turn. "Mr. Penhaligon," the judge said, checking his watch, "does the defense have any witnesses, or can we wrap this up before lunch?" Arthur stood up slowly. "The defense calls Lucinda Davis to the stand." A hush fell over the room. Lucinda hadn't spoken a word in public for months. She stood up, smoothed her skirt, and walked to the witness box. She sat down. She looked small, fragile. Arthur walked up to her. "Mrs. Davis, you have heard the testimony against you. The nurse, the doctors, your husband. They say you are an alcoholic. They say you are unfit. What do you have to say?" Lucinda leaned into the microphone. Her voice was clear, steady, and melodious. "I say that every word of it is a lie designed to facilitate a hostile takeover of our marriage assets." "Objection!" Giles shouted. "She's speculating." "Overruled," the judge said, surprisingly. He seemed curious. "Let her speak," Arthur continued. "Mrs. Davis, why have you remained silent until now?" "Because," Lucinda said, locking eyes with Portland, "I was waiting for my husband to deny the existence of the security footage under oath, which he just did." Portland's face went pale. Mr. Davis claimed the system was down, Lucinda said. But the system wasn't down. He simply deleted the files from the main server. However, he forgot that the system backs up to a cloud server. A server I manage. Arthur pulled the USB drive from his pocket. Your Honor, I have here the footage from October 14th. It has been authenticated by a third-party forensic digital analyst. Objection! Giles screamed, panic in his voice. Ambush! We haven't seen this! Judge Holloway looked at the USB drive. He looked at Portland, who was now sweating visibly. The judge was corrupt, but he wasn't stupid. If he suppressed evidence that was this pivotal in open court with reporters present, his career would be over. I will allow it, Holloway said through gritted teeth. The video played on the large screens in the courtroom. The silence was deafening as everyone watched Portland Davis enter the nursery, look around, place the vodka bottle in the toy chest, and then smirk at the camera. When the video ended, the courtroom erupted. Portland jumped up. It's a fake! It's AI! She doctored it! Sit down, Mr. Davis, the judge roared. Arthur turned to Lucinda. Mrs. Davis, is there anything else? Yes, Lucinda said. The finances. She pulled a document from her jacket pocket. My husband claimed I emptied the accounts, but here is the bank transfer record. The money didn't go to a gambling site. It went to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, an account listed under the name Holloway Holdings. The entire room froze. Lucinda turned slowly to look at the judge. Your Honor, Lucinda said, her voice ringing like a bell. Why is my husband transferring $500,000 to a shell company that bears your family name? The silence following Lucinda's accusation was not the silence of peace. It was the vacuum before an explosion. The courtroom, previously buzzing with the low hum of whispers and the scratching of reporters' pens, had gone dead still. The air conditioning vents rattled overhead, a sound that suddenly seemed deafeningly loud. Judge Marion Holloway sat frozen on his bench. His face, usually a mask of arrogant boredom, had drained of all color, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting under the lights. His eyes darted from the document in Lucinda's hand to the faces of the reporters in the back row. He saw them typing furiously on their phones. The story was already out. This is preposterous, Judge Holloway finally stammered, his voice lacking its usual boom. He banged his gavel, but the strike was weak, a hollow thud against the wood. Mrs. Davis, you are out of order. You are in contempt. Bailiff, remove the defendant. Two bailiffs stepped forward, their hands hovering near their belts, looking uncertain. They looked from the judge to the woman standing in the witness box. Lucinda didn't flinch. She stood like a statue carved from ice, her gaze fixed on the man who had tried to sell her life for a retirement fund. I am not in contempt, Your Honor, Lucinda said, her voice cutting through the tension. I am a whistleblower, and under the laws of this state, I am reporting a felony in progress. That document is a certified bank ledger from the Cayman National Bank. Obtained through a subpoena, I filed myself 3 days ago under a pseudonym to avoid detection. It shows a direct wire transfer from a shell corporation owned by Portland Davis to Holloway Holdings on the very day you were assigned to this case. That is enough! Roger Giles, Portland's lawyer, shrieked. He was standing now, his face purple. This is a circus. I demand a mistrial. I demand this woman be arrested for slander and data theft. Sit down, Roger, Arthur Penhaligon said. The disheveled lawyer hadn't moved from his seat, but his voice carried a weight that silenced the room. He slowly stood up, buttoning his stained jacket with deliberate slowness. If you want a mistrial, you'll get one, but you won't get an arrest, because I have just emailed a copy of that ledger to the State Judicial Ethics Committee and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. It sent 2 minutes ago. Portland Davis turned to look at his lawyer, his eyes wide with a terror he had never known. For the first time in his life, money couldn't fix the problem in front of him. "Clear the court!" Judge Holloway roared, standing up so abruptly his chair tipped over backward with a crash. "Everyone out, now!" Chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions, camera flashes popped like strobes, and the bailiffs finally moved, not to arrest Lucinda, but to block the press from rushing the bench. In the mayhem, Lucinda stepped down from the witness box. She walked past Portland. He was gripping the defense table so hard his knuckles were white. "You," Portland hissed, his voice trembling. "You ruined everything. Do you have any idea what you've done? It's not just me, Lucinda. You've kicked a hornet's nest you can't understand." Lucinda stopped. She leaned in close, so close she could smell the fear sweating off him. "I didn't kick the nest, Portland. I burned the tree down. Tell Sophia I'll be coming for her soon." She walked out of the courtroom doors and into the hallway, where a wall of cameras awaited her. But she didn't stop to speak. Arthur guided her through the throng, his arm a protective bar around her shoulders, leading her to a side exit where his battered sedan was waiting. As they drove away from the courthouse, the rain finally stopped. The grey clouds broke, letting a single shaft of sunlight hit the wet pavement. "You know that was just the opening shot," Arthur said, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "Holloway is done. He's toast. But Portland has partners, men who don't wear robes and don't care about the law. You need to go underground." "I'm not hiding anymore," Lucinda said, staring out the window at the passing city. "I'm done hiding. Portland said something back there. He said it wasn't just him. He said I kicked a hornet's nest." Arthur exhaled a plume of smoke. Corporate fraud usually involves more than one bad apple. If Portland was washing money, he was doing it for someone. "I need to find out who," Lucinda said, "before the next hearing." "There won't be a hearing for weeks," Arthur replied. "The state will assign a special master, a new judge, someone from out of the county, maybe even a federal appointee given the corruption charges. We have time. But Lucinda, look at me." She turned to him. "You poked the bear," Arthur said grimly. "Now we have to make sure it doesn't eat you before we can skin it." 3 weeks passed. The scandal was the biggest news story in the state. The Davis affair, they called it. Judge Holloway had resigned in disgrace 2 days after the courtroom incident and was currently under house arrest pending a federal indictment. But Portland Davis was still free. He was out on bail, his team of lawyers spinning a narrative that he was a victim of extortion, that Lucinda had fabricated the bank documents. It was a weak defense, but it bought him time. And in that time, he went on the offensive. Lucinda was staying in a safe house, provided by Arthur, a small cabin near the lake, owned by Arthur's sister. It was isolated, quiet, and terrified her. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every rustle of the wind sounded like an intruder. She spent her days poring over the files she had extracted from Portland's cloud server. The Holloway Holdings payment was just one line item in a spreadsheet that spanned 5 years. There were other payments, large ones, to names she didn't recognize: Apex Logistics, Cerberus Consulting, the Orion Group. She searched for these companies online. They were ghosts. No websites, no employees, just P.O. boxes in Delaware and Nevada. One evening, her phone rang. It was a burner phone Arthur had given her. Only 3 people had the number: Arthur, Tobias, and the new court clerk. "Hello?" "Mrs. Davis," a smooth, unfamiliar voice said. "Or should I call you Ms. Cross?" Lucinda froze. She hadn't used her maiden name in 6 years. Who is this? A friend of your husband's, the voice said. Or rather, a business associate who is very concerned about the instability of the market. You have some files, Lucinda. Files that don't belong to you. I don't know what you're talking about, Lucinda lied, her hand reaching for the knife she kept on the kitchen counter. Don't play games, the voice soothed. Portland is a fool. He let his domestic issues interfere with business. We don't care about the divorce. We don't care about the custody battle. But we do care about the Orion file. Delete it. Wipe the drive. Do it by midnight, and you'll find $5 million in an account of your choosing tomorrow morning. Refuse, and, well, accidents happen in remote cabins. Gas leaks are so tragic. The line went dead. Lucinda dropped the phone. She stared at the fireplace. They knew where she was. She grabbed her laptop and the knife. She ran to her car, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't turn on the headlights until she was on the main road. She drove fast, her mind racing. The Orion file. She hadn't looked at that folder closely yet. She pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour truck stop, connected to the spotty Wi-Fi, and opened the folder. It wasn't financial records, it was medical data. Portland's pharmaceutical company, Davis Pharma, had recently launched a new drug, Neurovance, a revolutionary treatment for Alzheimer's. It had been fast-tracked by the FDA and was making billions. Lucinda scrolled through the PDFs. These were clinical trial reports, but they weren't the ones released to the public. These were the internal memos. Subject 14, deceased. Cause, aneurysm. Subject 22, deceased. Cause, stroke. Subject 35, violent psychosis followed by cardiac arrest. There were dozens of them. The drug was killing people. And beneath the data was a series of emails between Portland and a man named Senator Corvus. Bury the data, Portland. If this gets out before the election, we're both dead. Pay off the families. Use the offshore accounts. Lucinda covered her mouth. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was mass murder, covered up by bribery at the highest level of government. She needed to get this to Arthur. But as she put the car in gear, she saw black SUVs pulling into the truck stop entrance. 2 of them. They moved slowly, shark-like, scanning the parked cars. They had tracked her phone. Lucinda ducked down. She couldn't call Arthur. They would trace it. She couldn't go to the police. Portland had the senator in his pocket. She was trapped. Then she remembered the one person who had warned her. Tobias. She crawled to the back seat, staying out of sight, and found the old walkie-talkie Tobias had given her, just in case. It was a long shot. It was a short-range radio, but he lived only a few miles from this highway exit. Tobias, she whispered into the static. Tobias, pick up. Breaker 19. This is Lucinda. They found me. Silence. Then a crackle. Location? Tobias's voice was clipped, professional. The Petrostop on Route 9. 2 black SUVs. They're blocking the exit. Sit tight, Tobias said. Keep your head down. I'm 3 minutes out. Those 3 minutes stretched into an eternity. Lucinda watched through the tint of the rear window as men in tactical gear stepped out of the SUVs. They weren't police. They were cleaners. Just as one of the men approached her car, a blinding light flooded the parking lot. A massive semi-truck roared around the corner, its horn blaring a deafening blast. It swerved violently, blocking the SUVs. Behind the truck, a beat-up Ford Bronco screeched to a halt. The passenger door flew open. "Get in!" Tobias screamed. Lucinda scrambled from her car, sprinting across the asphalt. Bullets sparked against the pavement near her feet. She dove into the Bronco, and Tobias floored it, peeling out onto the highway before the men could react. "You have a busy life, Mrs. Davis," Tobias grunted, checking the rearview mirror. "They're killing people, Tobias," Lucinda gasped, clutching the laptop to her chest. "Portland's drug is killing people." "I figured it was something like that," Tobias said. "Arthur called me. We have a new court date. Tomorrow morning. Emergency session." "Tomorrow?" Lucinda asked. "But we're not ready." "We have to be," Tobias said, "because the new judge just moved the timeline up. She wants this over. And Lucinda? This judge? She doesn't play golf with Portland, but she's known as the hangman. She hates liars. If you walk into her courtroom, you better have the whole truth." The Honorable Judge Margaret Haynes was a terrifying woman. She was 60 years old, with steel-grey hair pulled back into a severe bun and eyes that seemed to X-ray every soul that entered her courtroom. She didn't use a gavel. She simply tapped her pen on the desk, and the room fell silent out of pure fear. The courtroom was different this time. Federal marshals lined the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of impending doom. Portland was there, looking worse for wear. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his suit hung loosely on his frame. But next to him sat a new lawyer, a man named Silas. No, wait, Silas is banned. A man named Victor Thorne. No, Thorne is banned. A man named Victor Draven. Draven was a high-powered defense attorney from D.C., known for getting warlords and corrupt politicians off the hook. "Mrs. Davis," Judge Haynes said, her voice dry as parchment. "You have been evading a protective custody order. You have fled a safe house. You are currently in possession of stolen corporate data. Why shouldn't I have you arrested right now?" Lucinda stood up. She was wearing borrowed clothes, a simple sweater and jeans. She looked tired, but her eyes burned with a fierce light. "Because, Your Honor," Lucinda said, "the people chasing me weren't police. They were mercenaries sent by my husband to recover evidence of a massacre." "Objection!" Draven boomed. "Hysterical conjecture. My client is a respected businessman." "Your client is a monster," Arthur Penhaligon said, standing up, "and we are ready to prove it." "This is family court," Judge Haynes snapped. "I am here to decide custody of a child and the division of assets. I am not here to try a pharmaceutical homicide case. That is for the criminal courts." "They are linked, Your Honor," Lucinda pleaded. "He wants custody of Sophia, not because he loves her, but because her trust fund holds the controlling shares of the company. If he loses custody, he loses the company. If he loses the company, the records come out." Judge Haynes leaned forward. "That is a very complicated theory, Mrs. Davis. Do you have proof that links the child to the cover-up?" "Direct proof?" Lucinda hesitated. The Orion files proved the drug was deadly, and the bank records proved the bribery, but linking it legally to the custody of Sophia was the weak link. The trust fund documents were complex. I am working on it," Lucinda admitted. "So you have nothing concrete to tie this court's jurisdiction to your conspiracy theory," Judge Haynes said coldly. "Mrs. Davis, I admire your tenacity, but I am a judge of the law, not of vibes. Unless you can show me why this child is in immediate danger from her father, I have to follow the precedent of joint custody." Portland smiled. It was a weak, relief-filled smile. He was going to get away with it. He would get Sophia, and once he had her, he would disappear to a non-extradition country. "However," Judge Haynes continued, "I have one witness I would like to call myself." Both legal teams looked confused. The judge calling a witness? "Bailiff," Judge Haynes said. "Bring in Ms. Tiffany Snow." Portland's face went white. Tiffany Snow, his mistress, the executive assistant. The doors opened, and a young woman walked in. She looked terrified. She was flanked by 2 FBI agents. Ms. Snow has entered into a plea agreement with the federal government as of this morning, Judge Haynes announced. She has some interesting things to say about the night Mrs. Davis was accused of drinking. Tiffany Snow took the stand. She couldn't look at Portland. Ms. Snow, the judge asked, did Mr. Davis give you any instructions regarding Sophia Davis? Yes, Tiffany whispered. Speak up, the judge commanded. Yes, Tiffany said, her voice shaking. He told me that once he had full custody, we were going to move to Brazil. He said he needed Sophia because her signature is required on the trust release forms when she turns 18. But until then, he is her proxy. And regarding the safety of the child, the judge pressed. He said, Tiffany started crying. He said if Lucinda kept fighting, he would make sure Sophia got sick, just like the patients in the trial. So he could claim it was a genetic defect inherited from her mother, to discredit Lucinda further. The courtroom gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Portland jumped up, knocking his chair over. She's lying. She's a scorned woman. I broke it off with her. Sit down. Judge Haynes didn't raise her voice, but the command hit like a whip. This is hearsay, Draven shouted. You can't use this. I can use whatever I want to determine the best interest of the child, Judge Haynes said. But Mr. Davis, your outburst brings me to the point of this hearing. She looked at Lucinda. Mrs. Davis, you have presented a video. You have presented bank records. Ms. Snow has presented testimony. But there is one thing missing. Judge Haynes picked up a piece of paper. I have here a motion filed by Mr. Davis's team this morning. A motion to dismiss all evidence based on the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. They claim you obtained the passwords to the cloud server illegally, effectively hacking his accounts. If that is true, everything you found, the murders, the bribes, the video, is inadmissible in court. It will be thrown out. He will walk free, and he will likely get custody because you will be a convicted felon for cybercrime. Lucinda felt the blood drain from her face. It was true. She had used an old password, but technically she had accessed the system without authorization after the divorce filing. So, Judge Haynes said, leaning back, I am going to ask you one question, and be very careful how you answer, because your freedom and your daughter's life depend on it. This was it. The moment everything hinged on. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights. Lucinda stood alone in the center of the floor. Arthur couldn't help her now. This was between her and the judge. Judge Haynes took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked at Lucinda with an intensity that felt like physical weight. Mrs. Davis, the judge asked, her voice soft but piercing. Did you access those files using a password you guessed, or did you access them using a password that was given to you? Lucinda's mind raced. If she said she guessed it or used an old one, it was hacking, illegal, inadmissible, game over. Portland wins. But if she said it was given to her, she would have to lie, and perjury would destroy her credibility. She looked at Portland. He was smirking again. He knew she had hacked it. He knew she had no one on the inside, aside from the fired security guard, who didn't have admin access. Lucinda looked at the judge. Why ask that? It was a specific distinction. And then Lucinda remembered something. Something from 5 years ago. A memory of a rainy Tuesday, sitting in Portland's office when they were first dating. He was setting up the family trust. He had laughed and typed in a password. It's our anniversary, Lids. Cuanto fortunanaute. Easy to remember, since half of this is legally yours anyway. legally yours. Arthur had said it in the car. Joint property. Until the divorce was finalized, unless specified otherwise by a judge, marital assets were shared. Lucinda took a deep breath. She raised her chin. I didn't guess it, Your Honor. And it wasn't given to me by a third party. Then how did you have it? The judge asked. I used the administrative password for the Davis Family Trust, Lucinda said clearly. A trust which lists me as a co-trustee. Portland never removed my administrative access because he was too arrogant to believe I would remember the login. As a co-trustee, I have a fiduciary duty to audit the accounts. I didn't hack a stranger's computer. I opened the digital books of my own shared property to investigate theft committed against the beneficiary. My daughter. Silence. Portland's smirk vanished. He whispered frantically to Dreven. Dreven was flipping through papers, looking for the trust bylaws. Judge Haynes looked at Dreven. Counsel? Is she a co-trustee? Dreven looked pale. Aye. The paperwork for her removal was drafted, Your Honor. But it appears it was never filed with the Secretary of State because Mr. Davis didn't want to alert her to the asset freeze prematurely. Portland had outsmarted himself. By trying to blindside her, he had left the door open. Judge Haynes allowed a very small, very cold smile to touch her lips. Then the evidence is admissible, she ruled. The motion to suppress is denied. The judge turned to the court reporter. Let the record show that the evidence provided by Mrs. Davis is accepted. Based on the video of the planted evidence, the testimony regarding the threat to the child's life, and the financial records linking the plaintiff to criminal activity, I am issuing an immediate ruling. She looked at Portland. Portland Davis, I am stripping you of all parental rights, effective immediately. I am also issuing a bench warrant for your arrest on charges of perjury, child endangerment, and fraud. Marshals, take him into custody. No! Portland screamed as the marshals moved in. You can't do this. I'm Portland Davis. I own this town. Not anymore, Lucinda whispered as they handcuffed him. He was dragged out, kicking and screaming, his dignity stripped away, leaving only a frightened, pathetic man. Lucinda stood trembling. Arthur put a hand on her shoulder. It's over, kid. You did it. But Lucinda didn't just feel relief. She felt a surge of power. She had walked through the fire. She had been gaslit, framed, hunted, and nearly killed. And she had won. Judge Haynes was gathering her files. She paused and looked down at Lucinda. Mrs. Davis, the judge said, the next time you see a crime, try to call the FBI before you go rogue. You might not be this lucky twice. Lucinda smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in years. I hope there won't be a next time, Your Honor. I just want to pick up my daughter. Go get her, the judge said. The reunion was quiet. There were no cameras, just a mother walking into a garden where a little girl was playing with a dollhouse. Sophia looked up, her eyes wide. Mommy? Lucinda dropped to her knees, opening her arms. Sophia ran into them, burying her face in Lucinda's neck. Lucinda held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, the reality of her safety. Portland Davis was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. The Davis Farmer scandal toppled 3 senators and led to the largest class action lawsuit in history. Lucinda didn't take the settlement money. She gave it all to the victims of the drug trials. She started a small firm with Arthur Penhaligon, a firm dedicated to helping women who were being silenced by powerful men. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a storm, and she would never stay quiet again. And that is how Lucinda Davis turned the tables on a man who thought he held all the cards. She proved that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of coming to light. especially when you underestimate a mother fighting for her child. What did you think of Lucinda's strategy? Would you have stayed quiet that long, or would you have fought back sooner? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy one coming up next week about a lottery winner who hid his ticket in a place his wife would never look. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.